Chapter 9 of Tractate Bava Kamma continues on the laws of damages along with the principles of theft and robbery. The first Mishnah says, if a person steals wood or wool and then crafts it into a vessel or a garment, he repays the value of the original item that he stole, not the more expensive item he turned it into. Similarly, if a person stole a pregnant cow and it then gives birth, or a sheep which he then shears, he must repay the value of the cow while it was pregnant and of the sheep while it was unshorn. Or, if a person stole a cow or a shorn sheep and it becomes pregnant or grows wool while he has it, he repays what its value was at the time that he stole it, which is a general principle. The Gemara says, the thief has changed and acquired the wood or wool when he makes it into a vessel or garment, and only pays the original value. However, if he only sanded the wood or washed the wool, there's a debate if this is a sufficient change to form an acquisition between a few sources. There's variation. Some say there is a difference whether it's a reversible or irreversible case, which would affect whether it's considered to be a legal change biblically or rabbinically. Others say the difference between cases is whether it was a significant change, whether the wool was untangled or combed, or possibly if it was whitened or bleached. Others say there's variation if it was washed with dye on the type of dye, as some are permanent, others are not. Some hold simply if an item changes, it still nevertheless retains its prior status. This is debated from a number of sources, and it discusses various principles of charity ties. It's held like the opinion that if an animal degrades in value and deteriorates after stolen, it's returned to its owner in its current state. Some clarify this only applies if the deterioration is reversible. There are related points, and it mentions it was discouraged to accept an item that was stolen from you if the thief tries to return it, so as to more encourage repentance in thieves. This concept is additionally discussed. Regarding stealing a pregnant cow or sheep, where it gives birth or is shorn, we said it's repaid according to its value at the time it was stolen. Some, however, said to return the animal and its offspring, or wool, and debates why. Possibly he holds if it changes, it still retains its status, or possibly he doesn't hold that, but says it must be returned as an additional penalty. There's a practical difference if an animal went down in value since it was stolen. It debates this from a few cases, and it proves that it is due to a penalty. This is additionally discussed. There are other opinions on this topic. Some say that the animal would be returned as is, others say it's as if its value was assessed at the time of robbery. There's difference if the addition to the animal is still there, if that's also returned between these opinions. Others say they agree, it stays with the thief, and their debate is if the owner can get a percentage of the value of the addition. And further debates these opinions. Related, if a man steals an item, enhances it, increasing its value, and then sells it, the original owner must pay for the enhancement in the item. The same applies if the purchaser himself enhanced the item. If a non-Jewish man had stolen the item, enhanced it, and sold it to a Jewish man, this leniency would not apply, and he would not get to retain the enhancement when he returns it. If a Jewish man stole it, sold it to a non-Jewish man who enhanced it, who then sold it to a Jewish man, it's unresolved what the status is. It's been established that changing an item creates an acquisition by a thief. If he cut down somebody's tree to steal it, or even made them into logs, this is not considered to be a sufficient change to form an acquisition. Logs being turned into beams is sufficient. Large beams being turned into small beams is not. If they were turned into boards, this is a sufficient change to form an acquisition. Stripping a palm tree from its leaves is sufficient of a change. It clarifies more of these. It debates if splitting the central twin leaf of a palm frond, if this is considered to be a sufficient change to create acquisition. Turning earth into a brick is not a valid change, as it could be turned back into earth. Turning a brick into earth is sufficient, as even if it is changed back into a brick, it's considered to be a different brick. The same applies with melting silver into coins and vice versa. It gives more examples. The general established principle that a stolen object is returned according to its worth at the time that it was stolen includes if a calf or a lamb were stolen, and then it grows up into a cow or a ram. That's a valid change, creating an acquisition, meaning the thief can slaughter or sell the animal without suffering any excess liabilities. It gives instances of cases. New Mishnah, if somebody stole an animal or a Canaanite slave and they aged over time and decreased in value, he must return their value at the time he had stolen them. Others say this does not apply to a Canaanite slave, he just returns them as is. Payment goes according to the time of theft if the item reduced in value, be with a coin that broke, vegetables that rotted, wine that went bad, and similar. Exceptions to this, where the item is just returned as is, even if it had decreased in value, are coins that were made invalid by the government, teruma that became impure, leavened bread where Passover passed by, or an animal that was made impermissible through sin because it killed somebody and was going to be executed or otherwise. The Gemara says, when it says the animal aged and is repaid according to its original value, it means any form of deterioration, not just aging. It's held that Canaanite slaves are returned as they are. These opinions are discussed further. It brings additional opinions on these laws. It mentions if somebody has another person's slave work for him for a bit, he does not need to pay the owner, as this benefits both of them, as it also has the slave practice. Others clarify that this should still not be done if the owner of the slave owes money to the other man, as otherwise it'll just look like he's charging interest, which is not allowed. If somebody uses another man's ship without permission, some say he must pay either the amount he should have rented it for, or the diminished value of the ship. Others say he must pay the diminished value of a ship. Some say the difference in opinions is the first is when the ship is available for renting, the second is where it's not. Others say they agree it's available for renting. The first opinion says it's where he took it intending to rent, the second is where he intended to steal it. When it said a coin broke and decreased in value, some say this means literally, others say it refers to the government cancelling the currency. If the government invalidates it, it's not considered changed if it's still allowed in other regions. Those that say a coin is cancelled by the government is not considered to be changed. This is unlike rotted produce and similar, as the coin itself is not changing. If somebody borrows a specific type of coin, which the government then removes from circulation, some say he must repay it with a valid type of coin in circulation. Others say he gives back the original coin to spend in a different country if he wants, so long as he has the means to get there. It brings additional cases on currency and consecration of coins. It also mentions several old currencies. One had the names of King David and Solomon on one side, and a picture of Jerusalem on the other. Abraham himself had a currency with an old man and an old woman on one side, and a young man and a young woman on the other. If somebody lends a person a coin on condition that he returns the same currency, and the government in the meanwhile increases the size of the coin, even by a large degree, he just repays with a coin that was in circulation at the time of the payment. It's also adjusted according to market value. Further, if somebody rolled somebody's coin into a sea, he's exempt if it's clear water and the man can just go get it back. This is only if you rolled it, and picking it up and throwing it in is considered to be theft. If somebody flattens another man's coin, he's exempt as he hasn't reduced its value. If he files it down, he must repay him. This is debated. If somebody cuts a cow's ear, some say he's exempt, as it's otherwise fine, and although it's a blemish, most animals aren't brought as temple offerings anyways. Others seemingly disagree. There's also exemption for burning another man's promissory note, a receipt that can be redeemed for money, so long as there are witnesses who can draw up a new note. Others say if the man is trusted to request his money without the document, it's fine even without the witnesses. There are various opinions as to the validity of this point. The remaining points in the Mishnah are qualified. New Mishnah. If somebody gives an item to a craftsman to repair, a chest, box, cabinet, or otherwise, and the craftsman breaks it, he's liable to repay him. If somebody paid a man to demolish his wall and the man broke the actual stones, he's liable to pay him. If a man is knocking down a wall and the wall collapsed from a different side and damages something, he's exempt. If it fell directly due to his work, he's liable for anything that breaks. The Gemara says, a craftsman must only repay what he broke if he received a full item. If he was told to build something, a chest, that he then built himself and then broke it himself, he's exempt. It discusses this from various similar cases. Related, if an expert butcher slaughters somebody's animal and it winds up non-kosher as he did it improperly, he's liable to pay due to negligence, which means he'd pay even if he did this job for free. Others disagree that he'd be considered to be negligent, and it's debated between several opinions. If somebody brings money to a money changer and the money changer mistakenly says the currency is valid, causing the man to then lose money, one source says he's only exempt if he was an expert, others say he's liable no matter what. It's explained the opinion that says experts are exempt refers to where the coin was from a new press, so they just didn't recognize it. It brings instances of these cases. It's proven that some hold there's liability for damage caused through indirect action. New Mishnah. If somebody gives wool to a dyer, and the dyer burns the wool, ruining it, he needs to pay him back for the wool. If the dyer dyed the wool poorly, if the value of the dyed wool is greater than what the dyer spent, the owner repays that to the dyer. If what the dyer spent is greater than the additional value to the wool, the owner pays that to the dyer. If the dyer dyed the wool the wrong color, red instead of black, or vice versa, some say he repays the value of the wool, others say he pays either the increased value or repayment for the cost of the dyeing, depending on which costs more, as described. The Gemara defines what it means to dye something poorly. If a man gives a craftsman wood to make a chair, and the man makes a bench, some hold he is repaid for the wood, meaning the craftsman gets to keep the bench, others say he must pay the man the excess of what he spent, or the increased value, whichever is less, meaning he does not acquire the bench. If the buyer requested a beautiful chair and he received an ugly one, it's agreed that the craftsman does not acquire the chair and the buyer must repay for the excess labor or value. It debates what the status is in the described debated dye case as to whether dyeing wool is considered substantive enough to create an acquisition by the dyer. This is debated from various sources and further argued on. It brings points on produce during the sabbatical year and it debates as to who we hold like regarding repayments for messing up dyeing wool. There are later opinions that seem to rule on this, and later tractates of Bava Metzia and Bava Basra, so some say that they were written out of order, others say that these three tractates are just considered to be one big tractate. So it does seem to imply like the ruling that if the dyer messed up, he'd be repaid excess labor or increased value. Related, if somebody sent his agent to buy wheat and the man bought barley, some hold any loss or profit goes to the agent, others say loss goes to the agent and profit would be split. The difference in opinions is whether him changing the purchase formed an acquisition. Others disagree and say the dispute is whether the agent was sent to buy the wheat for food or for merchandise. This is further qualified. Further, it said if a man purchased a field in another man's name, the man does not need to sell it. If the man purchased a field in another's name, on condition that the man will sell it back to him, the man must sell it to him. It's debated as to what this means exactly. Some say it's that if a man tells somebody he's buying property on behalf of some great individual, so that way the sale won't be contested, even though he actually wasn't told to do so. The great individual does not need to give the property to the buyer unless that was the condition of the sale. Others redefine this case, saying if a man is purchasing a field on behalf of his friend, the seller does not need to grant him ownership immediately unless that was the condition of the sale. This is discussed further along with related incidents. New Mishnah. If somebody stole from another a minimum of a value of a peruta coin and took a false oath that he hadn't done so, and he wants to repent later, he must return the money he stole to the original owner alone, nobody else besides for an agent of the court. If the man had died, he can return it to his heirs. He does not need to pursue the man to return the money if he's only returning the principal and not the excess fifth, or if the principal was forgiven but not the fifth, or if everything was forgiven save for a value less than a pruta. He would still need to pursue the man if he's only giving the extra fifth and no principal, if only the excess fifth was forgiven and not the principal, or if everything was forgiven besides for a remainder greater than a pruta. If somebody takes a false oath that he had already paid an excess fifth payment and then needs to pay an additional second excess fifth from the first, if he lies about that also, he needs to keep adding fifth payments until it shrinks to the value of less than a pruta coin. Broadly, if somebody steals after offering a pledge, a deposit, if he robbed, exploits somebody, swore falsely about a false item he found or similar, he needs to pay the sum of what he stole, the principal plus a fifth of its value, and he also needs to bring the guilt offering. The Gemara says, the implication from this is that if somebody did not take a false oath after stealing from somebody, they would not need to go excessively out of their way to return the item in accordance with one opinion. It debates between these opinions further. It's also said that the money must be returned directly to the man alone. If an agent was appointed before witnesses to collect the debt, it's debated if this is a valid agent. Some say yes, as he's been appointed as such. Others say no, as he's been trusted to deliver the money back only. It debates these opinions from sources. Based on the fact that we said if the thief returns the principal, but no extra fifth, he does not need to pursue the man to return the money. This would imply that the fifth is considered to be monetary restitution, not a fine, and if the thief dies, his heirs would need to pay it back instead. It discusses this and it cites several other sources. It brings up, what if the heir had taken the false oath regarding stolen items, and it brings variation depending on the accessibility of these stolen items and the means of repayment. Regarding the point that if both the principal and the excess have been forgiven, if there's less than a pruta owed, he does not need to return it. That's only if it's not physically there, as if it is, it might go up in value. Others say this is not a concern. Related, if somebody steals 3 bundles of produce worth 3 prutas and their value drops to 2 prutas, it said that if the thief returns 2 of them, he must still return the third. He also said, as mentioned, if a person steals bread and passive repasses, making the bread prohibited for benefit, he can still just return it as it is. The logic of both is that the bread is returned as it still does exist and was originally worth money, and the produce too was originally worth a full pruta and was returned accordingly. Related, it's asked, if somebody stole 2 bundles of produce, which together were worth a pruta, and he then returns 1, does he need to return the other, as it is worth less than a pruta? It said no, and there's also no mitzvah in returning the first half, as that also wasn't worth more than a pruta. There are related cases on cutting the hair of a nazir, on sealing broken barrels, and similar. It brings lengthy discussion on principles of false oaths relating to theft and similar. Particularly, some hold that taking an oath in such a case on an item can create acquisition, and it's debated as to what exactly this refers to. Some say that a guardian of an object would no longer need to pay monetary restitution in such a situation. For instance, if a person claims that he left money as a deposit by a particular person, and that person denies it and takes an oath that it's not true, and then witnesses prove that the first man is lying, he would nevertheless be exempt from any payment, as the other man took an oath, creating acquisition, meaning there's no monetary restitution. There's a later case that's pretty similar, and the man took an oath, however, he actually would be responsible to pay monetary restitution there, as is explained. Either that oath was taken outside of court, so it doesn't count to this degree, or it's that he took an oath before the court required him to do so. These points are discussed further. Additionally, it said if somebody has an animal left with him as a deposit, and he claims somebody stole it, but in actuality he himself had, he would be liable to pay double, and if he had slaughtered or sold it, it would be the excess 4 or 5 times payment, just as it would be by a thief based on a juxtaposition of verses. These verses are debated on. Additionally, it said if a person finds a lost object and then steals it, and then claims some thief stole it, he must pay double. Also, based on a verse which is discussed, it said if somebody falsely claims that a thief stole his deposit, he's only liable to take an oath if he denies part of the claim of the debt and admits to part of it. This is explained as the normal reason he'd be believed without an oath is because his claim would be so insolent, essentially, that he's just automatically believed, but if he's admitting that he still owes partially, it's not that insolent, and he needs to prove his honesty with an oath. This would not apply by a loan where the man did him a favor, only by a deposit where he did not. Some say the 4 types of legal monetary guardians need to take oaths if they admit to part of their debt, being an unpaid watchman, a borrower, a paid watchman, and a renter. It brings sources. Some say if a man claims a thief stole his deposit when it was actually himself, he'd only be liable to pay double if he actually used it for himself. Others debate this point. There was an earlier source which said, if a guardian falsely takes an oath that a thief had stolen his deposit and witnesses testify otherwise, he need to pay double, but not an additional fifth for the false oath. The debate's why. Some suggest that the monetary obligation for the double payment removes the need for the fifth payment. Others say that the fact that he took the oath resulted in him needing to pay the double payment and not the fifth. Based on a different source, it conclusively proves that it's the monetary obligation of the double payment that removes it. In the event that a person lent his ox to be watched by 2 people, and they both falsely claim and take oaths that the ox was stolen, and then the first one admits his guilt, and the second one has witnesses testify that he lied. So technically one should be paying a fifth and the other should be paying double, but perhaps it's considered just to be one monetary obligation, so both are not paid. It's left unresolved. So there's another case. If a man took an oath that an item he was watching was lost, and then admitted that he still had it, and then took the oath again, and then admitted he still had it, or something similar, so he's now technically liable for 2 extra fifth payments. It debates if both are paid and proves from a source that they are. Another case, if a guardian took an oath that the money in his deposit had been stolen, but decided to pay it back from his own funds anyways, and then the actual thief was caught, it's a debate who the thief pays the double payment to, the owner or the guardian, depending on if the guardian took acquisition of this payment when he reimbursed it by himself. This debate is based on various described sources. Related, there's a case if a guardian took an oath that a thief had stolen the deposit and the thief is caught, and the thief admits to the guardian that he stole the money, but then denies it to the owner, so the owner brings witnesses that it was stolen. It debates if the thief becomes exempt from double payment by admitting his guilt to the guardian. It asks further questions on this, which go unresolved as to further cases. If a thief stole a deposit from an unpaid watchman who's not responsible for such an occurrence, he can either try to get reimbursed by the thief or just take an oath that he wasn't responsible and be totally exempt. If it was a paid watchman, he can't just take an oath as he was responsible for it, so he must get reimbursements from the thief. Others hold even an unpaid watchman can't just take an oath to be exempt. The logic of this debated, but it stands unresolved. New Mishnah. If a guardian claimed an item in his deposit was lost and accepted an oath that that's the case, and witnesses then claim that he took it for himself, he must repay the principal. If he admitted himself that he had stolen it, he repays the principal plus a fifth and brings a guilt offering. If a guardian claimed an item in his deposit was stolen and accepted an oath, and witnesses claim he took it for himself, he must pay double. If he admits he took it himself, he pays the principal plus a fifth and a guilt offering. If somebody robbed their father, took an oath that it wasn't them, and then the father passes away, and he then admits his guilt, he pays the principal and the fifth to the father's heirs, his brothers usually, and brings a guilt offering when he doesn't keep his own share of the inheritance. If he does not have enough to repay what he has stolen from his share, he borrows money and repays his creditors from his share. Related, if a father vows against his son benefiting from him and then dies, the son still inherits, as it's no longer the father's property. If the father vowed against his son benefiting from him during his life and during his death, he can't inherit from him and he gives his portions to the other heirs. If he's lacking in funds, he can borrow money and repay his creditors from his share. The Gemara says, if a son robbed his father and now needs to repay the heirs, as mentioned, some add, he can put the money in a charity purse if he wants, and some say he must clarify that it's what he had robbed. It's additionally debated if the son robbed his father, as he's inheriting a portion himself, why he can't just repay what he took from his own inheritance. It's explained in accordance with other opinions who reject the permissibility to forgive your own monetary obligations. It debates to this point from a number of other sources regarding robbery of converts and the laws of monetary restitution if they pass without heirs, which goes to Kohanim typically, as will be discussed. These principles go further. New Mishnah. If somebody robs a convert and takes a false oath that he hadn't and the convert passes, the thief must give the principal and a fifth to Kohanim plus a guilt offering, which is based on this verse. If the thief is going to deliver all this and then dies, the money is given to his own heirs and the guilt offering animal is left to develop a blemish and then sold as funds for the communal gift offering. If the money was given to the Kohanim before the man died and before the animal was offered, it stays with them. He must have the funds delivered to the Kohanim prior to the offering, and if the offering was sacrificed before he brought the funds, he must bring a new offering. It's fine if he had given the principal before the offering and not the fifth. The Gemara clarifies sources for these points. It's also said, based on a comparison of words in a verse, just like the guilt offering, the returning of funds cannot be done by night or in halves. Also, the returned funds must be sufficient that there's at least the worth of a pruta for every on-duty Kohen in the watch that he's delivering it to. Kohanim cannot exchange different restitutions by these laws to get different amounts. Additionally, these Kohanim receiving these stolen funds from a past convert, it's a debate if they have the legal status of heirs or gift recipients. There's a practical difference if leavened bread had been stolen, and Passover passed if they're repaid from the current or prior value. A different source does in fact reference this payment as a gift, which is what it is considered to be. The remaining points are qualified. It discusses this further regarding the order of payment and the bringing of the guilt offering between different watches, and that's the end of chapter 9.